Let me just start with.
It's too bright.
Okay. So I guess you can just see there are 4 points on the slide. So let's start with the problem, right? So what's the number one problem that we identified on why we went and changed our entire front end stack, mobile stack? Why did we change it? So we've started doing something called focus group discussions. I'm sure you heard of. We call it secret society internally, where we actually reach out to our users, we understand their feedback, we ask them certain questions, and you keep probing into questions till you get the right signals, right? That you can feed back into your product, development life cycle, etc. Now, so a couple of signals that we did get from our users was that a lot of users were finding it difficult where the memory of their phone was getting eaten up by a lot of apps. So you start prioritizing, you start deleting apps. How many of you do that? Anyone here? Yeah. I just need to get better phones, but anyways. So they started doing that, and based on that, we realized that, and Simran also asked me this question before the talk, that why don't you just make a lighter version of your app? Why are you making a progressive web app? Why don't you just make a lighter version of the app? So what happens is that the lighter version of the current app package is actually average about 10 MB to download, right? So the progressive web app, there is actually no package that you need to download. So we want to be where the users are, but we don't want it to be the other way around, right? We don't want to just put out an app or put out a light version, or we want to put out like a progressive web app and then expect users to come there. We want to actually be where the users are. So the whole idea of moving towards a progressive web app and moving our front end native apps to React Native, we're going to walk you through the journey of that today. So I'll let Sahil kind of continue, then I'll jump in.
Sure. So a few things to just highlight here. One thing is about our PWA. When we sort of went down that path of actually creating it, we evaluated a whole bunch of technologies, and something that sprung up was a combination of Node and with React.js. Now, the reason for that was it gives you leverage to run everything on JavaScript, and we can sort of start to take advantage of technologies that have been implemented in companies like Facebook, Google, and stuff like that. Fancy stuff that they do, leveraging off best portions of client-side and server-side computation. So one problem that we face even today is when we try and do separate development, server and client development, you have slow innovation, basic features take too long. You need to send out updates in terms of the app for everything. Everything is not now 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. So somebody like a Ravdeep who heads product is faced with a dilemma of, okay, if I want to go live with something in the next 2 weeks, he needs to wait for a month for it to actually roll out, and then he needs to make his plans accordingly.
Yeah, the other problem with that is rollout of the app itself, right? That the fact that you rolled out something to 100%, it'll take at least 3 or 4 weeks for the app to come down to about 80% of our user base. And some people still don't update. So that also is one thing we have to live with.
Correct. And one thing that is a big problem for a company like ours, where we're trying to innovate every 2 weeks, is it's twice the effort. So, and if you include web, it's thrice the effort. So you're developing for web, iOS, Android. So that's the outline problem. Now, another aspect of this is our mobile footprint is increasing, every day. We're penetrating more markets with, getting into more people's phones in effect. That's why we needed to create the PWA, so that even if you have a lower end phone, you don't end up downloading the app, you just use the PWA and you're good to go. Development, on the other hand, is not catching up. It's the same problem of slow larger development times and slow innovation. So it's taking longer in comparison to our penetration. One problem that we face is web and apps usually don't go by the same timeline. Web is usually far ahead in comparison to what mobile is, but our traffic on mobile is twofold. So we're trying to bridge that gap between the apps and web together.
Okay. So I'm just going to walk you through some very, very sort of basic, how a front end, architecture or platform has been laid out, right? So if you look at design V1, that's the current design that you see. Let's just call it V1 right now, it's version 1 design. And then if you look at our progressive web app that you're seeing the design for now is actually called design V2, right? Now design V2, we made the progressive web app based upon the Android and iOS native app design. So if you go to a native app, you'll see, we call it V2, you'll see a certain design. You'll see the same design on the progressive web app. So the progressive web app feels like a native app, although the website is completely different right now. So it feels like they're different platforms from different companies. So obviously the website's running on HTML, CSS, PHP, and the progressive web app is running on React. And respectfully, Android and iOS are running on Java and Swift. So what we want to move towards is a design V3, right? And the reason to do this, this is where design plays a really, really important role, is that we didn't decide that, we're going to move the website to React, and then we're going to move, the Android apps to React Native. No, so I think the problem to solve was how do we give the same user experience across platforms, right? So it wasn't about the technology being the same so that we do the same design. It was completely the other way around. So we kept, again, this is that same philosophy of being where the user is. So whenever you're developing something or designing something, make sure you're actually answering a need for a user first and then figuring out which is the best technology to stack to go for. So we said, okay, why don't we make sure that our website and a progressive web app look the same, and obviously the apps also look and feel the same. Now, what are the advantages in doing this? One of the biggest advantages that I manage a team of about 30, 40 designers. Out of those designers, every time a designer is designing something, they're adding a new design language, which causes a lot of problems for developers to not work in a certain framework, right? That reusability of components and thinking of interaction. So only time designers have to think different is versus you interacting with an element through either a mouse or touching it on a screen. I think you should be worried about more on the platform limitations, constraints, and exploiting platforms versus trying to retrofit a design into another design on a different platform. So moving the progressive web app and the website to React, that's what we've accomplished. The PWA moving to React, and we just launched it a few days ago. Actually, you must have seen it in the news. There's a bit of PR around it, and now we're moving the same code base is going to be used for the website. So what we're doing is we're just taking the React code and just opening it up for the website. So it'll be a very mobile-first design. Earlier, what people used to do is they'll make a website, और उसको सिर्फ responsive कर दो, you just make it responsive, move a few elements around. So there's a lot of drawbacks in that. We're going the other way around. We're actually making the React mobile site first and just opening it up to the web. And then also just go back once. And also moving the native apps to React Native, but partial React Native, right? Sahil will talk a little bit more about in detail on why it has to be partial. It completely cannot be the same. So, but you might not even feel the difference when you're jumping from a native screen to a React Native screen, right? You might not even feel that's, based on for the user, the design and the experience has to be completely invisible. That's our number one goal. And so obviously the users don't care about React Native and React and all that stuff, but the benefits, I think Sahil will take you through that journey in a bit. So to achieve all of this, we have to come up with a very, very, very strict UI kit and framework. And that framework, so imagine like this, UIs have all, anybody use Bootstrap back in the days? You use those, yeah. So think of making your own Bootstrap thing is much more important now. If different platforms need to take, elements from that and reusable components, it becomes a lot easier. You make one change here. So it's like a cascading environment versus just not thinking CSS, but the entire environment is cascading. So we're moving towards that. But for that, design starts to play a really important role is because the definitions of not just visual design, I think also of interactive sort of animations. So we've gone to the detail of actually controlling the speed of an animation on our mobile app and our website. It has to be the same. You know, the ease in, the ease outs, all those. So I think that also builds a personality in your product. It's really important. So going from, if we want to use a certain drop down or certain slider that opens like a, you know, accordion, the speed of that and the way it opens, that also has to be consistent. It's not just elements, it's all these other interactions and behaviors also that need to be simple. So, Sahil, why don't you, do you want to take over?
Yeah.
So, something about the PWA. So, even if you open it up right now, you'll realize that it's exceptionally fast.
Oh, yeah.
It actually, even on 2G networks, it's blazing fast. We'll come to some stats. But that was our main
And
focus.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really want you guys, maybe after the talk or while you're here, you guys should just open up your browser and, you know, give it a shot. It's really fast.
Yeah, I think you should go for it. Just open that and maybe just toggle over to the app and see the kind of you know, experience that you're getting. It's pretty identical. One more thing is we wanted to do feature updates really quickly. So we on the fly change our UI as and when we want, depending on user feedback. We don't have any blank sections. So when you load a particular page, you'll never see a blank container waiting for content to load in it.
And that has to do with
yeah.
usability heuristics, right? So again, this is like a design concept where, does anybody know what usability heuristics are? No? Okay. So it's really simple. There are all these fancy words for user experience, but if I explain it to you, it's really, really logical and simple, right? It's an interface that should always give you feedback and just talk to you, right? When I interact with a person, that means that person has some sort of form of energy is being, you know, exchanged between us. That means I'm forming a personality based on some feedback I'm giving. Interfaces are the same way. Whether it be your website, it be your mobile website or your app, if there is a blank screen, your users are just going to get lost. You just put 2 words over there, or you put a loader over there, you put something there, but the interface needs to talk, right? So one of the important things in usability heuristics we keep in our mind is make sure the interface is always giving feedback and talking on any action point. Even if it's an error, it's communicated properly. Then there are techniques of, you know, it should further kind of solve that problem through further actions and all that stuff. But the advantage in React is that the entire fundamental of React is that they themselves, the way they've built it is they try to avoid blank screens completely. So that's the beauty of it.
One interesting fact is anybody ever used jQuery or any other minor JavaScript plugins to sort of build stuff? All right. So if you've ever observed, you head over to your network module in something like a Chrome, you'll observe that data loads and then it renders. So what we've done in our PWA is we've done server-side rendering. So the entire page is computed, created on the server, and then just shot to the browser. So what it ends up doing is we use very little memory. So something like a jQuery website would probably be twice the usage of memory in comparison to something that is built on the server and then shot to the client. Now coming to offline support, basically we've created a caching mechanism wherein you can pull movie listing and showtimes offline.
Yeah. So imagine, you know, the environment in which users book anything, right? So movie tickets. You don't go outside the box office and try to book a ticket, right? Although that's a problem we're trying to solve. You're probably sitting on your couch or you're somewhere out or you're in office or wherever. Then the environment in which you book is very, very different. Say if you're traveling and you're moving around and you go through a bad network patch, right? And you were on a page, your page is going to try to refresh again. Boom, you got a blank screen again. Right? So what React does when you're going through that network patch, it'll cache that page for you in offline mode. The minute you're on, you don't even realize, and the page is the page is not reloaded, but it's still there. So the network is switching on and off in the back. And I think that's been very powerful. That is probably one of the contributors for conversions that went up by 80%.
Right. So I'll probably just so about the PWX experience while developing. I'll shift the focus on Ravdeep to tell you a little bit about what was the thought behind it and what has it led to?
Sure. So with the PWA, right, the focus from the design standpoint and from an engineering standpoint was speed, right? As far as possible, get people from whichever step they are on to the next step as quickly as possible, and make sure that if the network is volatile, we are able to handle it. Some bit of it with offline caching, some bit of it just by loading the containers first, and you just at least seeing the text there till the time the image is loading as well. And just move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So the idea with a lot of the service workers here was that as the page loads, and progressive web apps are technology that a lot of the browser makers are supporting. So it's not like something we invented from scratch. That you can load a container of a page, then keep making the data calls and keep refreshing those small components, containers individually every time. And this is where the power of that solution really kicks in. And you want to add something there?
Just to give you a little perspective in terms of how things are handled as of right now on the apps. So anybody who's ever built an app or even a web app, you'll observe that you need to create a network layer, meaning that you need to create AJAX calls or fetch calls to ask for data. Then you need to store that data. It could be in variables, it could be in function sets, wherever. And then you need to serve it. It could again be in an app form factor or web app form factor. Now, this is the current scenario, but it's a problem. So if you face a blockage anywhere in this life cycle, your application will not render for any reason. So one thing that we've sort of figured out with our PWA and React Native, it got validated in the PWA, is that we need to create something that will break this cycle. So what we've done is we've established a middleware, which we have done in Node, which also does the server-side rendering. So that middleware talks to all of our services in the background. So if we need API data, if we need views computed, if we need any data storage, smaller data storage to happen, caching to happen, it all happens in this Node.js middleware. Then it's shot over via the network to your phone's network module, then stored in either your phone's database or local storage. And then UI again is, the entire business logic of the UI is written in one place. Now, iOS apps, Android apps, and your browser understand UI slightly differently. So what you do is you customize a few things, but at the end of it, the business logic is the same. So if it's a listing, you compute the listing in the same way that you would on all three form factors and just render it. The syntax of rendering slightly changes.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the challenge with a designer over there would be, okay, you know what, iOS has its own sort of guidelines because everybody on this whole iOS ecosystem of apps, they don't know what material design is. They're not used to material design, right? So Google kind of, I would say, they're a bit evil to force you to be like, hey, you need to design it in such a way because all our apps are designed this way. So we want all your apps to be designed this way. So I think for that, this framework, right, makes it really challenging at the same time to design because I can't make a material design completely for Android in this, right? Because that will not work on iOS. So you got to find a happy ground there as well.
Okay, something just taking away from the same point that I made earlier is that you write code in one place and change your syntax to render it in multiple places. So the entire concept of React is around learn once and write everywhere. So you learn your logics, algorithms stay in one place and you port the syntax in whichever form factor that you need to display it. So yeah, the medium we chose is React Native for mobile apps because it got extremely validated for us in the PWA. This is slightly technical. So anybody ever used BookMyShow has gone through the seat layout. Now, to explain the middleware, what happened in the web app and the apps is we made 3 calls: init, get, and set. So all of these 3 calls took certain amount of time. For argument's sake, 600 ms. Cumulatively, for me to actually confirm my ticket, it took me 1.2 seconds. With the middleware, we can do that in about 300 ms. So you're looking at a 3/4 reduction of time. So the total time taken, 600 ms. The perception in your mind will be that it's blazing fast in comparison to what it was just a few weeks back. One more benefit that we found was in using HTTP2. Now, anybody ever explored persistent connections here? Okay, so basically what HTTP2 does is it creates a constant connection, and you can send data back and forth by just establishing that connection once. So it currently happens on your phones when you're using WhatsApp, when you're using Hangouts, but they do it through MQTT, which is another connection type, but not good for static content or larger packet sizes of data. So we've used HTTP2 to serve all our static content, text-based content, whatever we don't change. Videos, a lot of the seat layout data doesn't change very often. So we use HTTP2 for that. Now, yeah, I'm going to let Ravdeep take over the outcome of what happened.
As Anish was mentioning, right, the first part of the V2 was to validate and move our mobile web to a progressive web app and just see how we are able to realize the benefits. Now that has been live for the last 3 weeks, and we've already seen an 80% jump in conversion. This also has meant that in the last 8 months or so, right, the overall traffic on mobile web is now higher than on our desktop websites. It's just where the users are moving. Now combine that with an increase in conversion here, we didn't realize we were sitting on a practical gold mine, that our revenue contribution from mobile web jumped overnight.
Yeah.
The other major advantage was that you use a mobile web probably because you had a cheaper smartphone, you were on a worse off data connection. So even load times on 2G networks are now significantly better, up to about 50% better. So this is where business-wise it really helped us to just change the underlying front-end stack. And then now the next phase of the evolution will be to move our apps also to React Native and the desktop web to a React platform. Cool.
So, just wanted to show you guys something interesting.
Yeah, so we call this one-click booking.
Yeah.
This is again, so just to, just kind of reiterate, we've been always doing sort of design first and not saying, so like, we didn't say that, okay, you know what, let's build everything in React Native, then let's go design, right? So again, this is like a one-click booking approach, which Sahil's going to walk you through. And then we realized that the technology like React Native, when we build it out in components, it's easy to plug and play and A/B test at a component level also when we start, releasing stuff. So like, I went up to Ravdeep one day and I was like, hey, I need, data on how many people are clicking back on the seat layout just to change the show time, and they keep coming back to check the seat availability, right? So you'd be surprised that number was pretty high.
That was about 40%.
Yeah. So a logical decision based on that data that he identified was that, okay, why don't you just move the show time to the seat layout, right? Very simple, logical thing to do, but it was a very data-driven design decision. Now I'll give you another data point over here is, if you see it says PVR Market City Kurla on top, our data also tells us that most of the people actually just go to 1 or 2 cinemas, right? You don't end up going to like, if I live in Lower Parel, I will not go to Mira Road to watch a movie. It logically doesn't make sense. That's a lot of feedback we've gotten from users as well. So intelligently, if you start pre-populating that one data point, we've actually saved an entire showtime screen over there. And again, if you tap on that module, it'll just come up as a module and have a perceived loading of that it's all in one screen. So this is a one-click booking that we're trying to achieve in this one screen.
Yeah, so I think the beauty of this is that this is the final amalgamation. For most of our users, we'll probably be able to guess all this information at one point in time. that you generally go on a Friday evening to watch a Hindi movie in a 2D format or a 3D format, right? That sort of guesswork we have to do. But each of these parameters we'll achieve with a certain level of probability. For instance, if you want to watch Logan, for some person I'll be able to estimate that this guy wants to watch it in a 3D IMAX. For some other guy, I might not be able to make that estimate. So these all are individual components. For wherever we can guess really well, we'll automatically make the assumption and go with it. Wherever we can't, it's an intermediate step which takes you to evaluating how often did we get it right, how often did we get it wrong, and we'll keep learning from it. So a lot of the under the hood changes are enabling us to make our machine learning really, really strong, and user personalization, of course.
All right. So, any native developers here for mobile? Okay. So, just to give you a little bit of understanding of how React Native works is, you code it just like you would a website, and you templatize your entire structure. And for example, these show times that you see, they could be one aspect of the entire page. If you were doing web development, that seat layout could be one. The venue could be one, the quantity and date could be one, the movies below could be one. Now you can separate these things and use them in multiple places. You don't necessarily need to slot them in one screen. When you're doing this in native, it's a mammoth task to actually build these as components. You're going to take 6 months in probably building this one screen. So what we decided was we'll do part of this screen in native and part of it in React Native, because React Native eventually converts to native code and runs on your phone. So the seat layout is native, everything else is React Native. So I'm just going to play this quick mock.
Yeah.
Flip through movies. It's basically everything happening in one place.
So now, just to give you a little more understanding of how this currently works is, if you started from the movie listing page on BookMyShow right now and you tap book, that's where your journey starts. You're making about 8 screens and you're making about 12 odd calls, API calls. Now, in this case, if you want to create this one view, the max you can do is 2 API calls, which is what we've accomplished through that middle layer using Node.js, wherein we collate all of these APIs, we structure it in one output format, and then we spit it out to the client. Okay. Outcome. I think he's going to be the happiest out of the outcomes.
Yeah. So I think one of the things was that in the earlier cycle, right, and that cycle is actually currently running right now, we release an update to the store every 2 weeks, and these are the individual stores. So iOS, Android, we release an update to these stores every 2 weeks. Then we have the adoption challenge of everybody updating their apps. Because our app bundle is about 10 MB, some people who are more data sensitive, who don't have a Wi-Fi connection where it automatically updates, some people don't update at all. So in fact, I got a screenshot just about 5 minutes ago, which was about 8 months old app. And a guy was complaining that this feature is not working. Obviously, it's not. You're like an 8-month-old code base. And this is a huge problem for us. So what we end up in the React Native phase is that we can actually roll out an update to the store every month. But some of the underlying changes, right? Things like A/B tests, increasing the rollout percentages, decreasing them. Things like very small UI changes, not like major ones. Or things like small instrumentation changes you can do without actually rolling an update to the Play Store itself, which makes our life easy, and we plan to move to a monthly release cycle so that our adoption rates are much better and even data sensitive users are more happy with us.
And people stop bothering me every 2 weeks, release gaya, release.
Yes, people. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I think that's just an adoption graph, right? Yeah, it is more about how quickly can we then roll out features. In a React Native world, our hope is that we'll be able to roll out features in a way faster clip for the reasons I was describing earlier than in the native world. Hopefully, we'll be able to catch up to the kind of pace that we want to in no time at all.
that's on my end.
Yeah, much faster.
Overall, production level development time reduces, which is extremely important for us. We're trying to, tap into different markets. We're trying to do innovative things. If I, sort of give them a timeline of 6 months to do something, it's not going to work for, their ideas to actually get validated. So the intention is to reduce that time and sort of ship new stuff out as fast as possible. Yeah. So where does React Native sit? It sort of creates a bridge between Android and iOS and web in our case. What it does is it collates this business logic. People write it in one place and reuse it everywhere. Now, one thing or two, three things that you can't do with React Native, which Native does very well, is network level, modifications, data storage, the way memory is used, the way battery is used, certain native modules that are used. You can't do that as well as you would in native code with React Native. So our intention is, since React Native as a platform itself or a framework itself is evolving, we'll wait till those modules start to get mature and we'll start to port those. So currently, we're just moving our UI UX to React Native to ship stuff out quickly.
Yeah. We're done.
Yeah. So just highlighting bullets here. Immediate adoption. Features are released without an update. Drastic reduction effort considerably reduces our timelines. This is actually a bigger win for me than for them. Features are always rolled out together, so I don't need to worry about mapping my feature to a version number. And we end up running a leaner and more efficient team overall.
So earlier, what was happening is that I had to have a designer that's designing for the web, designer for the apps, and a designer for mobile web. Whereas now you can just have one designer designing everything.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think we're done from our side.
If you guys have any questions?
If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. We generally prefer.
You just said that we are right now, because of the limitations which you mentioned in React, you are just using React for the UI UX, right? That is what you said. So can you elaborate that? What exactly, when you say that we are using just for UI UX, so is it just the front end design stuff, or because I'm not that well versed with React, that is why I want to know.
So I'll answer, we'll answer in two parts. I'll tell you from a purely design perspective. I think he can touch upon more what's under the hood. I'll give you, one of the main thing is speed, right? I think a lot of people don't realize that user experience is not only about visual design, but it's also the actual experience of speed, the transitions from one screen to another screen. Now, when you say transitions, you also say shared transitions, right? Like, how do you make the user feel that, okay, they were on one screen, they went to the next screen, feeling that they were on the same screen, right? So, it allows you to do a lot of that, right? Getting rid of the blank screens. So on the front end, those are, very, very sort of things that are to your advantage. And obviously doing updates at a component level. So the technology does like a diff on the DOM in the back.
So if I want to say the same thing with the web app, like typical web app, then that would, in the web app example, that would be for HTML, CSS and JavaScript.
Correct. But in HTML, CSS and JavaScript, what will happen is that you have to reload an entire page to see an update.
No, for that case study, these three components are the thing which you are trying to say for
That's
React,
right? That's right. That's right. Yeah. One answer.
So if you want a bit more of a technical answer, basically you're looking at only the, in an app, you create an XML to create the view. That's what we're changing. You create rendering logic in either Java or Swift. That's what we're porting to React Native.
Oh, okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, how much time did it take you to port to React.js?
4 months.
4 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
4 months with, started with 2 people, hired during trying to build it, and ended up with 8 people at the end of it.
A lot of learning curve?
Yeah, the steepest, I would say, I think. It was probably the
Absolutely.
steepest, even for design, even for the guys who are working. So it's very difficult to get React JS and React Native people. Believe it or not, we've not been able to find React Native people. We hire a React person and try to
Yeah.
make him
We've-
learn
we've
React
actually
Native. It's a lot easier. Like the other day I take like the final round of interview, and I usually, we all kind of hire together. So he sent me somebody that, hey, why don't you just talk to this React person? Although I know I'm hiring for React Native, and that's how I learned. I'm like, okay, you won't be able to find React Native people. They're very difficult to find. So learning curve was just steep, but the benefits of it, you would have been like, hey, I should have learned this way,
So resource can be an issue.
excuse me?
Resource can be an issue.
Not an issue. I think it's a mind frame and a mindset and an approach that you decide to take. And then HTML, CSS people can be kind of repurposed. So Sahil has actually been, it's like I've taken all my designers. This is something different we're trying, right? And it's turned out to be another gold mine we were sitting on, I think. We've taken all our designers on my team and I've made them stop doing design work. They're all learning React right now. They literally are. I'm not joking.
Okay, so
And he's been a big part of taking the training sessions, all that. But you have to go through a journey of learning HTML, then CSS, then JavaScript. So there is a progression, right? We are excited. Day one says start writing React Native, but we are doing that. And it's very important actually to be a designer and learn code, and vice versa. I think that's really important. I think India as a country, we're not known to be like a design, pro in design. It's always the West or the Europeans or Eastern Europeans that are good at design. But in engineering, we're good. And so I think it's very important. If you go out in the West, you'll notice that a designer always knows how to code. And a developer will always have a decent sense of design. So I think that's...
right. So learning React and React Native, it just sounds scary.
It's
yeah,
not.
That's
not.
the right word. It sounds scary, but
not.
as long as you know JavaScript and as long as your core fundamentals of algorithms, of how functions work, basically how functional programming works, if you understand that, you're in a very good place to start. It's just a way of writing code.
Yeah.
So as long as you sort of understand how to do proper functional programming and your basic concepts are clear, I think 2 months tops your...
Yeah, so the first
What
time
do we have to do in
I saw like a Photoshop interface about 12, 13 years ago, I was shit scared. I was really scared, right? Because there's all these tools, I don't know how to use them, this, that. But I think it was that day that I was like, you know what, I'm actually going to attack this and make mistakes and learn it. Then today when I look at it, I'm like, hey, it's really easy. Although we don't use Photoshop anymore, we use Sketch now. So, but yeah, just don't be intimidated by it. It's not rocket science.
Thanks.
Any more questions, guys? Or there's a couple more in the back.
Hi. Hello.
Yeah, go for it.
Hey.
Yeah. So PWA is in the trend now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So PWA is in trend now. Might be in the down the line after 3 years or 5 years, the people will stop creating the apps.
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, maybe. So see, the reason why I said maybe was that a lot of the browser makers are pushing for that to happen. The biggest one is Google, because if I make an app, Google can't index it.
Yeah.
If I make a PWA, Google can. So
Correct.
they have it in their interest to promote it. It's benefiting us. We don't really mind either way. So the catch is the footprint of an app is way bigger than that of a PWA as it stands today. We can provide almost the same level of functionality. There are a few things that we can't provide. Like if I'm a game manufacturer, I won't be able to make a PWA and make it as good as an app. But for an e-commerce website like us, we can. And we don't see any reason why we can't latch onto that bandwagon, just improve our conversions while we can do that.
Yeah.
Can we send the push on the PWA?
Yes, you can.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
From now only?
Yeah, you can.
It's already there.
Already there.
It's
So I
been
mean,
there for like
how
a
it's
year.
work? I mean, if the browser is closed and I don't have any URL on that, so how can you send a push?
Yeah, so you still have the browser installed. The first time you load the website, you have to explicitly give permission. So there is a pop-up which comes in that do you want to allow this website to send you notifications. The moment you do that, it sits, for the lack of a better word, with the browser, and then I can use that tap to via service worker to send you a notification.
Okay.
It works very much like a native push notification works today.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Correct?
Yeah. So, whenever I try to book a ticket from Cinepolis, the link usually fails. I think you might be aware of that.
Okay.
So, what can you
Cinepolis
do
which-
in that kind of scenario?
Cinepolis link fails. So
Yeah.
you're trying to book through the website app.
I tried both, and usually
Okay,
what
so-
happens is that different kinds of error pops up with different kinds of error code.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have bug hunter here, but no. So essentially, what happens a lot of the times is we're very dependent on the systems that the cinemas run, and a lot of the times that the data that we get from them, it could just be a connectivity issue, or it could be a time slot issue. For example, there could be a quantity difference. There could be a sync issue in terms of their system versus ours. So since we're so highly dependent on them, a lot of times these something's not right here sort of errors that you see are basically cinemas not responding to us in time, because it's happened that we've evolved a lot. The cinema systems have not. So
Does it happen on the seat layout or the payment page for you?
Seat layout.
Seat layout.
Then you know. So see, this is where you would notice it with almost any other e-com player who's an aggregator. Like, so if you check out people like a Clear Trip, which technically talk to an airline systems and then return back, right? At the time that they're trying to get an exact fare from an airline, they again see an error. So wherever we have dependencies on downstream systems, there's only so much you can sort of guard against it. We try to reduce them as far as possible, but unfortunately we're not always successful. So if you can show us exact screenshots, maybe just offline we can.
Yeah, I do have all these screenshots with me.
Awesome.
Love it.
Please,
Yeah,
we'd love to
works.
see it.
Thank you.
Love to see it.
And also, I also spoken to their IT manager because I know even they have a website as well as a mobile app. So I spoke to their IT manager, and it seems like they don't want to upgrade from their end. It's not your issue.
Yeah, that's very true.
So even you won't be able to do anything regarding that, right?
Yeah, no, but we're always assisting them, helping them, and trying to tell them to upgrade. But I mean, if there's a Tata Docomo connection there that has a limited bandwidth, you can't do anything. Right?
Okay, thank you.
So a lot of the times what happens is their systems don't sync with us correctly. So we're trying to evolve that. If you would have seen probably 3 years back, the sync times were 2 hours. Now it's 20 to 30 minutes. So the sync is what causes these issues, which we're improving with them.
No, actually, they were not listening to me, so they will probably listen to you guys.
We listen to you and tell them.
Any more questions?
Great. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
I think this
Thank
was
you.
super informative.
Thank you.